We're now ready to move into Chapter 27 of our A&P textbook and study the reproductive system. As we study the reproductive system, first you need to really pay attention to the anatomy of both the male and female reproductive systems. We're then going to look at how the gametes, which for a man would be the sperm and a female would be the egg, how they're produced inside of the body, and then we're going to look at what changes occur as the different hormones are produced to the egg and the sperm, and how that egg and that sperm move throughout the body. These sex hormones are really going to be where we see some of the more complex things going on within the reproductive system. So I've tried to kind of save that towards the end. Also, I like to start with the male reproductive system because it is slightly simpler than the female reproductive system. Beginning with the male reproductive system, we have several organs and accessory organs we're going to take a look at. First, we're going to take a close look at the testes, which are found within the scrotum. The testes, or commonly called testicles, are going to be the location where the male gamete, the sperm, is produced. The sperm, once mature, leave the testes through the epididymis, then through the ductus, or more commonly called vas deferens, out the ejaculatory duct, and then finally through the urethra to exit out of the body. Along the way, in order to achieve maturity and the ability to fertilize an egg, the sperm requires several secretions by the accessory glands, the seminal vesicle, the prostate, and the bulbourethral gland. This is a very important figure. You'll see as you do your lab work that you must learn the location of all these different parts within the male-female within the male reproductive system. If we kind of follow the path of production of the sperm and then exit out of the body, the sperm is going to be made here in the testicle. The testicle is located within this fatty protective area called the scrotum. The sperm is produced inside of the testis and then moves through the different regions of this large sac called the epididymis. Then out of the epididymis, the sperm travels through the vas or ductus deferens. The ductus deferens then comes over. It is now joined into this small region called the ejaculatory duct by a secretion out of the seminal vesicle. The sperm is now going to be considered semen because the sperm is now combined with the fluid from the seminal vesicle. The semen then travels into the urethra. There are several different regions of the urethra. This first part of the urethra here is known as the prostatic urethra. And then, as we keep going further down, it becomes the membranous urethra. At the point here where it is the prostatic urethra, the urethra is surrounded by the prostate. The prostate is going to secrete some more secretions to further produce the semen. The membranous urethra then becomes the spongy urethra. The spongy urethra is found within the penis. Surrounding the spongy urethra in the penis is the corpus spongiosum, and then on the exterior portion here is the corpus cavernosum. And the way I can always remember that, this looks like little caves or caverns, little separate compartments on the outside. During an erection, this corpus cavernosum is the portion that actually engorges with blood. The last gland we can see in this picture here is called the bulbourethral gland. You'll see it is located here right at the beginning of the spongy urethra. Notice here is the bladder. Now we've already talked about this in the urinary system, but I want to make sure and point out while we're looking at this picture that the urethra is the same organ that urine is expelled through the body. In a man, the reproductive system and urinary system share the urethra. That's going to be different when we get to the female reproductive system. Now just a few more details about each of these structures in the male reproductive system. The scrotum itself is technically just a sac with a superficial layer of skin, then some more fibrous membranes and some fat, simply there to help protect the testicle. Within the scrotum there are some important muscles that are important for you to know the name of. The most important of these are going to be called the dartus muscle and the cremaster muscle. The dartus muscle is a muscle that wrinkles the skin around the scrotum to help tighten and toughen the area of the scrotum. The cremaster muscle is a muscle used to help elevate or lower the testicles to maintain the proper temperature. In order for sperm to be produced viable, it must be kept at the appropriate temperature. If the temperature gets too cold, then that cremaster muscle will contract, pulling the testicles closer to the man's body so that the man will then be able to keep the sperm warmer. This view is sometimes a little bit easier for students to see the path that the sperm has to travel. So located down here, we have the testicle, and then the epididymis is kind of behind. Then the sperm would travel out the vas deferens and then join in. Another good thing about this picture is it allows you to see the different layers of the scrotum. The very outside layer of the scrotum here is the skin. Then the next layer we're going to have is going to be that more superficial, just tough membrane. That's where the dartus muscle is found. Then if we keep going in, we have another tough membrane. Then we start getting into some smoother membranes. The outermost of these is called the tunica albuginea, labeled here. Oh, I said that backwards, sorry. The outermost is going to be the tunica vaginalis, labeled here. And then as we keep going in, the very outside, just the testicle itself, it's not actually part of the scrotum, is going to be the tunica albuginea. This large area at the top is called the pampiniform plexus. This is the area where all the blood vessels and nerves merge together to enter into the testicle. We'll flip to the picture to go over all of this stuff. If we take a cross-section of the testicle and look a little closer, we can see the inside of the testicle is composed of several different seminiferous tubules. It is actually within these seminiferous tubules that the sperm is produced. Seminiferous tubules are separated by lobules, into lobules with a septum in between. As the sperm is produced in these seminiferous tubules, it is then traveled and collected into a little collection reservoir known as the rete testis. Once the sperm is ready to leave the rete testis, it then travels out efferent ductules into the first portion, or the head, of the epididymis. The sperm then travels down to the body of the epididymis, then down to the tail of the epididymis. It is actually here within the tail of the epididymis where the sperm achieves maturity, in the sense that it is now capable of using its flagella to swim. The sperm then will enter into the vas or ductus deferens here. It says it later on in the notes, but while we have this picture, it's a good place to show you. This is actually the area where the ductus or vas deferens is cut when a man gets a vasectomy. A small incision is made through the different layers of the scrotum. This tube, the vas deferens, is then pinched, cut, and then burnt on each end to prevent release of sperm. Semen is still released, just not sperm. The penis itself, we've already gone over several of these structures. The end of the penis is known as the glans penis, and then we have the corpus spongiosum directly surrounding the urethra, and the corpus cavernosum on the very outside. Sitting at the base of the penis is the bulbourethral glands here. During an erection, it is the corpus cavernosum that fills with blood. The corpus spongiosum prevents the urethra itself from being crushed during an erection. Again, this view kind of helps us see and further reinforce the path that the sperm will take. Sperm is made in the testes through the head, body, tail of the epididymis, up the vas deferens. At this point, the vas deferens is joined by the seminal vesicle, and we get the ejaculatory duct, then the prostatic urethra, membranous urethra, spongy urethra. Now taking a little bit closer look at exactly what's going on through the ducting system. Within the epididymis, that is where the sperm, as I said, are going to mature and become motile. We then move through the ductus deferens. In the ductus deferens, nothing happens to the sperm. It just moves through the area. Once the sperm then enters into the different portions of the ejaculatory duct and the urethra, that is actually where we're going to see some secretions inserted from the different glands. The seminal vesicle produces the largest volume of what we know as semen, And the major component of this semen is going to be fructose. Fructose is a sugar. If you stop and think about why would the sperm need so much sugar, we have to go back to digestive system and even things we learned in biology class to remember what we need sugar for. Sugar is the main food source to make fast and large supplies of energy. The sperm are constantly moving the flagella to swim. That's going to require a lot of energy, so they need a lot of sugar to produce all of that energy. The prostatic secretion is a much smaller portion. It has several different things. This is where one of the major enzymes is secreted into the semen to activate the sperm, to help the sperm get its ability to be able to actually insert into the egg, and we'll get there in just a minute. The bulbourethral gland, the small glands at the base of the penis, actually secrete their solution prior to ejaculation. This is going to be a more mucus-like secretion. Its job is to help to lubricate the gland's penis as well as to make sure it removes any of the residues of urine that may be left in the urethra, since the urethra is shared by both the urinary and reproductive systems. Okay. All right, now we've already talked about this a little bit, but just to cover a little bit more, the erection itself is going to be, by definition, a stiffening of the penis due to engorgement with blood. As I said, the blood itself is going to go into that corpus cavernosum. This is actually a quite complex process, so we're not going to learn all the neurological impulses that are involved, but I do want you to realize it is a parasympathetic reflex. So it's not something that can be controlled. It is something that happens. Now, with age, men do gain the ability to control it a little bit more, but it is something that comes from the brain. And so there's different triggers for different people. Okay. When ejaculation does occur, it is going to require a combination of several different sympathetic spinal reflexes, and you should remember some of your spinal reflex arcs that you learned in A&P I. But the easiest thing to think about as we think about an ejaculation, since the urethra is shared between the two systems, there has to be a sphincter, and there is, called the bladder sphincter, that closes off and constricts. At the same time, all of the muscles are undergoing these rapid contractions to help cause the ejaculation or the ejection of the semen through the body. Now let's take a quick look at spermatogenesis. This is the process in which sperm is produced, and I'm going to go to the picture so we can look at it. When we think about a mother cell, now this is called a mother cell even though we're talking about a man, just because that's the terminology we use. If we remember from biology class, in order to produce our sex cells, we have to undergo meiosis. During the first phase of meiosis, you get two offspring cells that are identical to the original mother cell. But in meiosis, you go through a second phase where each of the daughter cells are now haploid, or 1N. We need our sex cells to be 1N so that when the sperm combines with the egg, we get then our 2N offspring that we're looking for. Now, specifically looking at spermatogenesis, we're going to see several changes occur as we go through the steps. We begin with stem cells called spermatogonium. The spermatogonium cells are capable of continual replication under mitosis. A man is capable of producing sperm almost indefinitely through life. He can make as many as he needs or wants. After the spermatogonia, or the stem cells, continue to undergo mitotic division, they will then enter when it's ready and when hormone signals are correct to turn into what we call a primary spermatocyte. The primary spermatocyte is now going to undergo meiosis to produce further spermatocytes and eventually early spermatids. These early spermatids have the appropriate shape of a sperm, the head, the body, and the tail, but they're not mature yet. They're going to look like this until they're delivered into the epididymis. Inside of the epididymis, they will then turn into what we call spermatozoa, or mature sperm. The sperm itself, as I said, has three regions: the head, midpiece, and tail. Each of these does have a specific function, but we're not going to look at this in too much detail. The head of the sperm is going to be the part that contains the nucleus and all of the important information that any human cell is going to have. But something to pay attention to, there's also something called the acrosome on the head of the sperm. If we flip back and look at this sperm cell for just a moment, this sperm cell, once it gets into the female body, is actually going to have to penetrate and go into the egg. So that little acrosome is going to contain some enzymes to allow it to break through the egg. The midpiece or body region, that is the part of the spermatozoa that contains a lot of mitochondria. Again, they need the ability to produce a lot of energy. And then the tail part's just for locomotion. Other than the different sperm cells that are found inside of the testicle, there are also cells called Sertoli cells. These are supportive cells. They produce nutrients and different signals to help the sperm know when to move from the spermatogonia to the early spermatid stages and different things like that. So now let's think about what hormones are involved with the production of sperm in men. It actually turns out to be a lot simpler than what we see with women. One of the most important hormones we see released, it comes from the hypothalamus. It is called gonadotropin-releasing hormone. Now this should recall something that you learned in Chapter 16. The gonadotropin-releasing hormone is then going to stimulate the anterior pituitary or the adenohypophysis to secrete FSH and LH. The FSH is then going to tell the Sertoli cells, you need to start releasing some of your proteins. That's going to lead to eventually the production of testosterone. The LH is then going to stimulate other cells to secrete testosterone. So technically what we have in men is one real important sex hormone, testosterone. So we get GnRH stimulates the release of FSH and LH. FSH and LH, even though they work in different regions and on different cells, they both lead to the production of testosterone. Once we get testosterone, then we start to trigger spermatogenesis, so sperm is produced. Now, other than the prompting of the spermatogenesis, testosterone does have other effects on the male body, most of which we know. A lot of the sex drive in men is related to testosterone production. Several anabolic effects throughout the body is related to testosterone, and just overall secondary sex characteristics in men is related to levels of testosterone. Interestingly, there are varying levels of testosterone that men do see throughout a monthly cycle, but it's not something as defined as we see in women, so we don't typically teach something like that.